Most people have never heard of him, but he may have been one of the greatest inventors in the world. Follow me down the rabbit hole about Rudolf Diesel. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the rabbit hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we are talking about Rudolf Diesel, the inventor of the diesel engine. Thank you, Lieutenant Paget, for your suggestion of this episode, and also thank you for your service. Here we go. And this ties directly to John D. Rockefeller, so that's why we are doing this right after doing the Rockefeller family. So, Rudolf Christian Karl Diesel was born on March 18th, 1858 in Paris, France. He was the second of three children to Theodore and Elise Diesel. Theodore was a bookbinder by trade when they lived in Bavaria, but after leaving his home, he met Elise in Paris, and he became a leather goods manufacturer instead. Rudolf was given away shortly after he was born, but about 9 months later, he was returned to his parents. I just thought that was like a fun fact. I don't really know why they gave him away or why he came back, but he went to live with several different people throughout his life. This was the first time. Like many families at the time, though, they were experiencing financial difficulties, so that could have been why they gave him away. So young Rudolf had to go to work. He worked with his father in his father's workshop. He would deliver the leather goods to people that his father would manufacture. And during this time, he attended a Protestant French school and became interested in social questions and technology, which helped him throughout the rest of his life. Unfortunately, the Franco-Persian War broke out in 1870 when Rudolf was only 12, which forced the family to move. They settled in London, with Rudolf attending an English-speaking school, but 12, his 12th year of life, seemed to be a pretty big year for him because a little while after the family settled in London, they sent Rudolf to live with his aunt and uncle in Germany to become fluent in German, which makes sense because dad's from Germany, mom's from Paris. You think that he would already be pretty fluent in French because he grew up there. So now he's going to Germany. So his uncle, Christoph Barnacle, worked at Royal County Vocational College teaching math, and he would often take Rudolf with him to school to attend his math classes, but also I think that he would go and attend other lectures as well. That can't be verified, but it makes sense with the direction he went in his life. He finished his basic education in 1873 at the top of his class because dude was super smart. And then he enrolled at the Industrial School of Augsburg. 2 years later, he received a merit scholarship from the Royal Bavarian Polytechnic of Munich. And this school specialized in engineering, but his parents did not want him to take the scholarship. So they were still living in London at the time. They wanted him to go straight to work. They thought, going to school is a waste of your time, a waste of money. I mean, he was going to get a scholarship, but they didn't want him to take it. They just thought, go to work. That's what the rest of us are doing, and we need the money. Of course, Rudolf did not listen, and luckily for all of us, he didn't listen, and he took the scholarship. In 1870, Rudolf Diesel got typhoid fever, so that prevented him from graduating with his class. So while he was waiting to take the next exam in order to graduate, because the typhoid fever prevented him from taking that exam to graduate with his class, he started on-the-job training at Sulzer Brothers Machine Works in Switzerland, so that way he could keep learning things even though he didn't have his degree yet. Finally, in 1880, Diesel graduated with the highest academic honors, of course, from the college. And after his graduation, he returned to Paris, where he helped out one of his professors, Carl von Linde, design and construct a modern refrigeration and ice plant. So Linde's whole thing was refrigeration, and this kind of got Diesel's foot in the door like learning how to manufacture things, learning how to put things together. Again, more on the job training, how to apply for patents, different things like that. In 1883, Rudolf married Martha Flash. The couple had 3 kids together, Rudolf Jr., Hetty, and Eugen. During this time, he was still working with Lind and was gaining patents in Germany and France. In early 1890, Diesel moved his family to Berlin, where he assumed management of Lind's corporate research and development and joined other corporate boards. He was not allowed to use the patents he developed while an employee of Lind's for personal use. So he needed to expand beyond the refrigeration field. So he had gotten these patents in the refrigeration field, but he was under Lind's corporation. All those technically belonged to the company, not to him personally. So that's when he decided to kind of move along with his life a little bit. But he was like super thankful for being able to work for Lind, but it just wasn't going to work out long term for what his goals were. So he first started working with steam. He did research into thermal efficiency and fuel efficiency, which led him to build a steam engine using ammonia vapor. But that engine exploded and almost killed him. Oops. He did research into high compression cylinder pressures, which tested the strength of iron and steel cylinder heads, but one of those exploded as well. That time, he spent months in the hospital and he had health and eyesight problems because it exploded in his face. So, wear eye protection, kids. Since he was in school, he had been working on a design for an internal combustion engine that could approach the maximum theoretical thermal efficiency of the Carnot cycle. A Carnot engine consists of a gas, a hot reservoir, and a cold reservoir, and the gas repeatedly heats and cools and expands and contracts in a cycle. So this same Carnot cycle works for refrigeration, and it works for a diesel engine. So it makes sense that he would go down this path because he has this history of refrigeration. He just needed to do something else with it. So finally, in 1892, he patented a revolutionary compression ignition engine, and he called it the diesel engine, named after himself. By the summer of 1983, he realized that his initial theory was not right, so he filed for another patent for the correct theory. So he fixed everything that was weird and wrong, and now he's got a new patent. This engine worked different than steam or gas engines because it compresses air in the cylinder, making it hot enough to ignite the fuel and create an explosion. He knew that 90% of energy available in the fuel was wasted in a steam engine. So he wanted to make something that was more fuel efficient, less waste, And it was invented to run on a variety of fuels to include like coal dust, vegetable oil, peanut oil. He didn't want it didn't necessarily need to run on steam because there was already steam engines. Steam wasn't going to work. So he wanted something. He didn't know exactly what, but this way it was more economical. So everyone could basically grow their own fuel because it could also run on like peanut oil. It could run on any kind of oil. So you could put anything in there, call it what it is, and it makes more sense for like the everyday, the average Joe. Fortunately for him, a manufacturing and engineering company in Germany gave him a place to test and develop his ideas throughout the 1890s. His first successful diesel engine was officially tested in 1897. And that engine is on display at the German Technical Museum in Munich. If you're ever there and you want to go see it, it's kind of a cool little thing. Anyway, in 1900, he presented one of his engines at the Paris World's Fair. That device actually ran on peanut oil and won a Grand Prix. So, it was definitely working very well. By the time Diesel was in his 40s, he was already a millionaire. So he was up there with like Tesla, Edison, all these big inventors of the time. He was as popular, like just as popular. Unfortunately, Rudolf Diesel's life ended earlier than expected and under super suspicious circumstances. So on September 29th, 1913, Diesel was aboard a steamship ran by Great Eastern Railway. He was traveling from Belgium to England on his way to a meeting of the Consolidated Diesel Manufacturing Company, of which he was part of the board, which makes sense because they manufacture diesel engines and he created the diesel engine. He ate his dinner and then around like 10 p.m. he retired to his cabin for the night. He did ask for a wake-up call the next morning around 6:15 a.m., but this was the last time that anyone saw Rudolf Diesel alive. The next morning when the crew went to wake him up, he was not in his bed, nor had it been slept in. Like, it was still in pristine condition. They did find his nightshirt neatly laid out, and his watch was placed where he could easily see it from his bed. They found a couple other things they thought were a little weird, but nothing really seemed out of place, out of the ordinary. But before he left for this journey, he had given his wife this bag, and he told her not to open it for a week. Which, as a wife, if my husband ever handed me a bag and was like, hey, don't open this for another week, I would immediately open it the minute he walked out the door. I love him so much. Don't ever give me a bag and tell me to wait a week to open it. I can't do it. I can't. The anticipation would kill me.
Did you know that over 40% of Americans have a hard time swallowing pills? So when it's time to take your vitamins, large capsules and pills are out of the question. We know that gummy vitamins exist, but they're full of sugar, they get stuck in your teeth, and they only contain a fraction of the nutrients you need. Luckily, Easy Melts has discovered the ultimate vitamin sweet spot. Vitamins that melt in your mouth, taste like a treat, and are packed with nutrients ready for absorption, all without an ounce of sugar. For a limited time, Easy Melts is giving listeners a free 3-month supply of vitamin D3 with their first purchase. To claim your free D3 vitamins, visit try.easymelts.com/spring24. That's try.melts.com/spring24. Say goodbye to the old way of taking your vitamins and say hello to the easy way. Menopausal and perimenopausal women, listen up. It's time to take control of your health and comfort, and Winona is here to help. Winona is a telemedicine company for menopause care who believes that your symptoms are real, important, and deserve to be taken seriously. And for many women, this starts with hormone replacement therapy. Winona's HRT is made with plant-based, bioidentical hormones rather than synthetic ones, so it better aligns with your body to offer relief from hot flashes, weight gain, and other uncomfortable symptoms. 80% of women who use Winona find relief within just 90 days. So, what are you waiting for? Get started today. Visit buywinona.com today to start your free visit. With free shipping and the ability to pause or cancel at any time, your path to wellness has zero obligations. Use code SPRING24 at buywinona.com for 25% off your first treatment plan. That's BYWINONA.com for 25% off. Winona. Menopause care made easy.
Anyway, back to this. After Rudolph's disappearance, she did open the bag and she found 20,000 German marks in cash, but also she found financial statements showing that they were basically broke. There was nothing in their banks. They didn't have anything to their names besides the $20,000. Which, when I first read this, I was like, well, being married to an entrepreneur, an inventor, you are going to have like ebbs and flows of money. You're going to have a lot of money sometimes and not so much money other times because you're going to be spending it on inventing more things. I'm not sure if that's what was going on here or if Diesel was just very bad at money management. Either way, basically left her with nothing. So people point to this and say that this is why he killed himself, and that he killed himself. That's the end of the story. He threw himself overboard. His body wasn't discovered for 10 days. During those 10 days, this was like front page news all over the world. People were like panicked. Where did Rudolf Diesel go? Like he just disappeared. They didn't know he was dead. They didn't know if he was alive. He was just gone. When his body was discovered, it was discovered by a Dutch ship. The sailors pulled the body onto the ship. They found that it was so badly decomposed from being in the water that they couldn't really identify him, so they just took some personal items off the body and then threw the body back into the sea. I don't know if that was like standard practice in the early 1900s, but that's what they did. So they took like a pill case, a wallet, ID card, pocket knife, eyeglass case, different things off of this body. When they got to port, like the normal port that they were supposed to be at, they did turn all these identifiers over to the authorities when they got into port. And then the authorities were like, there's this guy. He's been all over the news because he disappeared. He seems pretty popular, pretty, people know him. I wonder if this is the same guy. So they called the son and they were like, hey, can you come look at these things and tell us if this is your father or if this is just some other random body floating in the sea, which would be more scary, I think, if it wasn't Rudolf Diesel. And basically his son came and there was like, yep, that's my dad's things. That had to have been my dad. But his death is just so odd. Of course, the mainstream, like, quote unquote, easy answer is that he committed suicide, right? As I stated before, they point back to the empty bank accounts and they're like, well, obviously he killed himself. But he was on his way to potentially sell more of his product. And he was meeting with the representatives of the British Royal Navy to discuss powering their submarines with his engine. So he was going to make more money. It wasn't like they were broke and there was no way out. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, that there was more money on the horizon. And they weren't completely broke. Obviously, he left his wife with some cash. I'm wondering if he just did that because he knew, like, in a week she would need to go buy groceries or go buy something and she wouldn't have any money. So he was like, here, like, I messed up, sorry, but now you have something. I don't know. But also, if he was going to kill himself, why would he ask for a wake-up call? Like, did he want somebody to discover that he was gone? It just seems really odd that he would set up all these things for his future and then go and kill himself. Another thought is that he was murdered by the Germans for refusing to grant German forces exclusive rights to his invention. So the Brits had the most powerful navy, and they had the most powerful navy for decades by this point. For the Germans to even compete with the Brits, to become a world power, they would need a stronger navy. That's the only way that they're going to be able to be competitive. At the time, the diesel engine was the only way to power a submarine or a U-boat. So it wasn't like you could just put any engine in a submarine. You had to use a diesel engine. And diesel was the only one that could make the engine work for underwater purposes. So he had to physically make the product for the people that needed it for their submarines. So if the British got their hands on the same technology, the Germans would no longer have an edge. They would no longer be like a little step ahead. Not that they were that much ahead. They were just trying to build up to be even competitive, right? So now, because he was on his way to talk to the Brits, he was a threat to Germany. So the Germans may have killed him. Maybe it was all a ruse. So his death could have been staged by the British government to cover up the fact that he was defecting to the British cause. So his body was too decomposed to be identified, and they had thrown it back to sea. I don't think that the Dutch boat that found him, I don't think that they were behind anything. I don't think they knew anything. I think that they could have killed anybody, threw them into the water, and put Diesel's items on that body. So when the Dutch sailors pulled him out of the water, they didn't know who it was because the body was so decomposed, which could have happened to any body they threw into the water. But they just had to pull the identifiers off the body. Again, this could have been why he left his wife the financial statements and the money saying like, hey, sorry, I messed up. And then this was all staged to be like, oh, he killed himself. But then they took him to Canada instead, where he worked at the Vickers shipyard in Montreal. That's why you would see this sudden acceleration in its ability to produce a successful diesel engine for submarines in Canada for the British Navy. is because maybe Rudolf Diesel defected to Britain, went to Canada, and built them a bunch of diesel engines. Along these same lines, though, maybe the Brits killed him. So this was kind of a theory I came up with while I was doing the research, because every now and then I have my own thought. Imagine that. So maybe they killed him so they didn't have to pay for his invention. Although now that I'm saying that out loud, that might not work because they didn't have the diesel engine working for the submarines yet. But obviously they did if they had the sudden acceleration in diesel engines for submarines in Canada. Like that's real history. That actually happened. So maybe they already had the product. They just didn't want to pay for it. So they killed him. I don't know. Or maybe he threatened the wrong industry. Diesel once said, quote, "The use of vegetable oils for engine fuels may seem insignificant today, but such oils may become in course of time as important as petroleum and the coal tar products of present time," end quote. So basically he's saying that using a vegetable oil could work just as well as using coal, using petroleum. But if you think back to a couple episodes ago when I released the Rockefellers, I talked about John D. Rockefeller, and he was the oil king of the world at this time. So Rudolf Diesel was threatening Rockefeller's livelihood because oil was getting pretty big during this time, but also there was a huge debate of what the fuel of the future would be. Of course, Rockefeller wanted it to be petroleum-based because that was his industry and he basically ran the world of oil. But Diesel had won the Paris World's Fair with a peanut oil-fueled engine. So you didn't need a petroleum-based fuel. You could use any fuel. If people started growing their own fuel, they wouldn't need Rockefeller and his oil. So now you're threatening that whole industry, which has made Rockefeller the richest man in the world. Not great. Diesel knew he could break up the oil monopolies of America with his technology. Like, he didn't need the antitrust laws that actually ended up breaking up Standard Oil. He knew that his engine could break that up because you don't need oil to run a diesel engine. You could put vegetable oil in it. The need for kerosene at the time was also decreasing. So Rockefeller needed another way to make money through Standard Oil. So this was his way of continuing his legacy, and Diesel was a huge threat to that. After Diesel died, his engine was adapted to use crude oil as a form of fuel. Although it's different than gasoline because it's diesel fuel, but I mean, it's not that much different. Diesel fuel is thicker than gas and has more energy density. But there's a whole nother thing to this, because why don't we know the name Rudolf Diesel? Why don't we know where diesel came from? We know Henry Ford. We know Nikola Tesla. Why don't we know Rudolf Diesel, who created the diesel engine? For reference, when he was alive, he was just as popular as Elon Musk is today. So everyone knew him back in the day. But John D. Rockefeller, good old John D., he owned the education boards in the US. So Rudolph was literally written out of history. We don't need to talk about that guy. We don't need to look into or try to replicate what he was doing with that vegetable oil. That's stupid. Let's teach them that cars can only run on oil, on the petroleum oil that we are creating. This is the only way. And it makes sense. Honestly, from Rockefeller's perspective, that makes a whole lot of sense. You don't want people to recreate this. In fact, I learned a fun little fact while I was doing this research. In 1905, there was a fleet of electric taxi cabs in New York, and there's even like a charging station in Times Square. We don't know about that. We've never heard about that because that also went away when cars started using petroleum oil-based gasolines or fuels to move forward. Honestly, with how diabolical the Rockefeller family is, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that they've killed way more people than just the people we've talked about in the last couple episodes. So that is Rudolf Diesel. I didn't know anything about him. honestly, until I started this research because, I mean, who knows about Rudolf Diesel? Until next week, my friends, of course, stay skeptical, and I will see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Valaha, for our awesome intro.